So I feel I've got to use it.
Good idea.
It's going.
I only bought it last week, so I've got to use it.
You've got to.
Yeah.
You've got no choice otherwise, you know, you've got to do it.
No one does. There's no free will choice.
I haven't seen you for ages.
Oh my god, how are you? That's what Denise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, you're good with names.
Yes, I've got no name. You like Marion.
I always wanted to know what was going on. I always wants to know what's going on. Because it seems as though something's going on, doesn't it? It seems like it. Breeze coming through the door, you know, that seems to be going on. So I name it and then I feel a little bit better, I know what's going on. The truth is, I never know what's going on. I never know. just some random mix of ideas from what I've learned and words I've learned to label this and say, oh yeah, I think I know what's going on. That's the great illusion. That's what me says to itself. I've got a handle on this. I think I know, yeah. Of course, there'll be moments when you're pretty sure you don't know what's going on, and then you get freaked. Because me depends on that knowing. The sense of knowing what's going on is so essential for me to feel okay with myself, that I feel safe. Otherwise, this is completely terrifying to me. If I even get a little glimpse of, oh really, it's obvious, I haven't got the faintest clue, I have not any idea what's going on at all. Occasionally that can hit the me, that can hit you. And when it hits, it's usually felt as very intense fear. There's absolutely nothing to be afraid of, but me's very afraid, because the sense of I know and the sense of me are one and the same. I live in what I know. That's where I lives, in knowledge. And it's very easy for me to get, there's only what's going on. Hence Eckhart Tolle's very, very wealthy, just talking about now, because as a person, it's very easy to get there's only now, really. And then there's memories, they happen now, and then there's imagined future, that happens now. So this idea of now is very popular. Mindfulness is hugely popular. It's about being present. So presence and being in the now are very hugely popular ideas, but they're popular for me because me just takes those ideas and just uses it as more knowledge. Now I know, of course there's only now. And so me sits really comfortably in that. And it's more illusion, it's more nonsense. Because you can't know now. Where would it be? How would you separate it from then? So really, when I'm speaking, or when the words that come out are just trying to hint at this unknowing that this is. This is both unknowing and unknowable. So what is this? Well, it's what seems to be happening. What is that? I don't know. It's unknowable. And that's a full stop at the end of that. There isn't something after that. That's the trick. That's the trick. Because me will always go, yeah, but I'm not happy with that. That's not satisfactory. What does that give me? Well, it doesn't give you anything. Because there isn't anything for you. You are the need to have things. You are the need to know things. And essentially there are no things to know. We've made that up. Human beings have made up things. That's what language is. Objectifying. It's all made up. And it keeps me feeling safe. If I say I know something, immediately I have a sense of security in my knowledge, my wisdom, my understanding, my explanation. That's just me. It's just like, it's manna from heaven for me, all of that knowledge. The most bizarre thing is that none of that is necessary at all. All of your knowledge is utterly worthless. All of it. It doesn't touch this. This is not interested in your knowledge. It's not interested in your understanding. It's not interested in any explanation you might have of how this has become this, or how this actually is, how it came about. this, if it could, this would just laugh at your very futile attempts to know this. They're all empty, beautifully empty. And although it can sound nihilistic, this whole message, this unknowing, but it's not at all. It's exactly the opposite of that. Because your need to know and your fear of not knowing is the problem, you could say, is your problem. And that need to know is you. You are your problem. This inherently doesn't have any problems. But of course there's endless problems for me. Who needs this to be other than it is? Which of course, how could it possibly be other than this is? This is how it is. What is that? Well, just how it is. That's the end. And then again, it's a total full stop in that. There's no why. All why questions are only for me. All how questions are only for me. And they're all superfluous. This has no requirement for you to know how or why or what. To be exactly as it is. That's the love, that's the peace, that's the unconditionality, that's the total neutrality of this. It has no requirements. You have requirements. This has no requirements. And this is all there is. You are a fictitious overlay on this. Self-perpetuating. How it came about, I'm not sure. No one, again, it doesn't matter. It's just seen as irrelevant. Now, if you get a hint of your own irrelevance, and your own, it's worse than that actually, your own non-existence, the fact that you created you, and you continue to, then there can be terror, of course, because you've lived as you, and you think, oh, without me, how would I survive? I can remember those conversations, me having with me, all those self-conversations. What would I be without me? Well, you won't know what you are without you. You are the saying you know what you are. That's all. And if you don't know what you are, you absolutely don't know what anything else is. Because all of my knowledge of other things were in relation to me being a thing. I've objectified myself, and I objectify everything else. And by objectification I mean this: I know what that is. I know what that is. I know what that is. I know how that works. I know how I work, and I'll pretend I know how you work. Now, all of us have had relationships, and you know how big a lie that is. But equally, the lie is that you know yourself. That's a lie to itself. I know myself. I spent at least 30 years trying to know myself. It's the biggest industry in the world, isn't it? Well, in the Western world, self-help is the biggest industry by miles. It's vast. And it's endless. There's no end to you trying to help improve yourself. It's this self-improvement program that you've been on all your life that most people continue for their entire lives, it seems. Again, it's only in the story, but in the story, most people continue on self-improvement program, just abandoning one when it's hasn't brought you the joy and peace that you were hoping it was going to, and then me just looks for something new and gets really enthusiastic for a couple of months. Because the sense of self, the sense of me, is that sense of dissatisfaction. The not good enough is what I am, inherently. And it's simply not true. It's equally true that it's equally untrue that you are good enough. That's the bit that's really maybe tough to hear. So this message is not about that you are good enough. Because that sells a lot as well. I mean, I don't know how many self-help books I read that had something just in the cover about, if you read this book, then you will feel good enough. Shit, I bought a lot of those. A lot of those. Haven't we all? Anyone who's been in therapy, or anyone who's suffered from depression, anyone who's suffered with self-doubt or self-loathing, or if you've been a questioner and you've questioned yourself, then you had that inherent, I'm not good enough. You couldn't help but be drawn to anything that, if someone said, well, I've got an answer for you. And the wonderful thing about this message, I mean, it's dreadful, it's a terrible message, but it's wonderful equally, is that all of that is unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. It isn't that you could lose yourself, or that yourself could fall away, or that you could have a shift in consciousness, or that there could be an energetic shift, or that me could unravel, or that the energy of self, any of those descriptions, they're just more waiting for me. Me just makes those into new goals, new targets, something else to aim for. This is already all there is. There isn't anywhere for you to get to. There isn't anything to unravel. There isn't any energy to shift. Because if the energy was to shift, it would already have to be contained. It would already have to be something. And I understand why energy is used as a word, because it's amorphous. It's not, it hasn't got a centre. So its thingness is less of a thing than if we make it a solid object. But me doesn't hear that. I can remember how long I was waiting for an energetic shift. In my story, it was a long time. And all I said every day when I woke up, me said to me, it's not happened yet then. Not yet then. Still waiting. And the sense of self is the waiting for something to happen. Well, the wonderful news is there's nothing to wait for. This is already. But that's terrible news for me to hear. Because me says, well, this is not how I want it to be. This isn't it. I mean, it's got some benefits, it's got some good bits about it. There's a few things I like about this, but there's plenty of things that need improving. And one of the things is that I'm still here. If you've been going to non-duality, one of the main things that's wrong with this is, fuck it, I'm still here. Or you're not. Whilst waiting for something to happen, you will be waiting for something to happen. That's it. Oh, it gets a bit worse. Of course, the waiting for something to happen is what's happening. Of course. And the other thing, you've been to quite a few meetings and you've sat and you've thought, the human being who's speaking, they're obviously in a very different place to me. Inevitably, me says that. I did it endlessly. And I really want to be where they are, and I want to get what they've obviously got. Or to lose what I've got and they've lost. Same thing. Whether you see this as loss or gain, makes no odds really. It's still, this isn't it. That's all. So me will always say, this isn't it. Even when it knows full well, there couldn't possibly be anything else. Intellectually, you could have got, I speak to a lot of friends and they say, yeah, but I've got it, I've known this for years and years, that there isn't anywhere else to get to. There's only this. You know, they might say there's only here or there's only now, but whatever words we use to try and talk about this indescribable happening that doesn't happen, then they've got that understanding, but they're still waiting. And that's the greatest frustration, and I can remember being in that as well. So I know there's nothing to wait for, but I am still waiting. And I know I'm not going to get it. That can be a difficult place for me to be, very difficult. I know that. But that's okay too.
So what changed that the waiting stopped, ended?
Mm-hmm. That'll be it.
What changed?
The waiting stopped.
But it's, if you have no free will and choice, there's nothing that the person
No,
can do.
absolutely nothing.
It's absolutely,
It's very,
it just happens.
and it's very clear it didn't happen.
But it happened that the waiting ended. Because I fully understand the message.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said.
I fully understand it,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah. It doesn't help the understanding, does it?
well, if I've got no control,
No.
Or, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the waiting just ends.
Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't.
Well, nothing ends. But it can feel like.
Because I know what you're going to say, there's no difference between you and me.
No. How could there be?
Which I understand,
Mm.
but why do I feel like I'm separate
Mhm.
from you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. While there's a sense of I am, then you will feel separate. This is the tough bit in a talk. If I'm talking with anyone about this, this is the hardest bit because I know there's no help. And believe it or not, this character is quite compassionate, and that can be very difficult actually. But I can't. There's no one to help. Everything is perfectly okay. So while there's waiting, that's what there is. Yeah, and you can't. There's nothing you can do.
No,
There's nothing I can do
no.
because it's what's happening, and there isn't anything other than that. There isn't anything else than this being how it is. So if there's waiting, there's waiting. I could say that the waiting, there's no one waiting, but that's not necessarily going to help.
Well, it's the feeling of being separate
Yeah.
that is the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. That is the.
But even if I try to get out of that, and I fully understand it,
Yeah.
that separation has got to disappear on its own.
Yeah. It seems. Yeah. Because nothing actually appears or disappears. I know.
So can I just ask?
Because for something to appear, I mean, it's even worse. You could say, well, it appears that things appear and disappear. Apparently. It seems like things appear and then they disappear. That's what it seems like. And it seems like there's a me inside here that's separate when that's how it seems. And that's how it seems for most human beings, it would seem. That most human beings feel, okay, I'm this, and you're that, and that's that. And then it could seem that there isn't this and that is this. It's just not separate. The separateness can seemingly dissolve. But of course you couldn't do that. I couldn't give you any advice. This is the hardest part of this message. It's the easiest and the hardest because of course I'd have to work out some good advice and worry about what advice I'd give people. Which of course, if you're a therapist or a teacher, then that makes life quite tricky because you're trying to work out what advice would be good for one person, and you probably have to have, bespoke advice for each individual. It's in a different place, they're on a different level, so in one way it's very simple because there is no advice, because who would be giving advice and who would be receiving it? And you'd have to be on a journey then. And it's seen that no one's on a journey. Don't ask me how, that's obvious, but it's obvious. Even though I could talk of my journey, it's obvious that that's just memory. And any future, it just doesn't, that makes no sense at all. So there's a memory of a seeming journey, and if the journey was to continue, then it would have to be going somewhere. And one of the biggest reliefs of that sense of separation not feeling real is that I'm not responsible. I'm not irresponsible. I'm not responsible. Because all the things you've taken as your responsibilities, you're totally natural. That's just how it is. All the things that you've taken as your good qualities, it's just naturally what that human being does. No credit to you at all. All the things that you've done terribly wrong, all the mistakes, all the dark, the shadow self, all the bits that you've hidden away from most other people, and then in moments of vulnerability or feeling safe with someone you've told them, so you may have told your therapist and your closest friend, maybe your lover, but you regretted that, and then you can't take any responsibility of them. They're not yours either. They're just naturally what that human being has hidden away, or has what is labelled as dark desires, or things that you thought wouldn't be socially acceptable. So there's no guilt. It's just not yours. So there's some of the reasons why this is worth talking about. And even if we talked about this earlier, and we said, even if the self, you don't have a sense of, you could say that the self is totally unravelled, or even if it loosens its grip a bit, even if self becomes a little lighter, less intense, less heavy, then that's worth talking about. Just the loosening. Maybe maybe it isn't all about me. Maybe I'm not the centre of the universe. Maybe the world's okay without me. And maybe even this human being's okay without me. It would be perfectly all right without me. And just if that notion can slip in, there might be a loosening and a lightening. You might seemingly travel a little lighter, as Paul Hederman would say. I really like Paul. And he always talks about travelling lighter. And there he's not really talking about the total absence of self. He's talking about that loosening, that unravelling, that. So rather than be this tight, intense, it's just, I don't know, it's maybe So I've still got a sense of me, but I'm definitely not so sure about what myself is, and it doesn't feel like a rock in the middle of my chest. Less centred, more free, more open, more spacious.
What I was going to say on that subject